breaking story. A gentleman by the name of Gary Doherty was a former resident of Skid Row Housing Trust, starting at the produce. And we have a woman by the name of Rachel who actually onboarded him. That's still a team member of ours. We have a member of our team that helped train him by the name of Charles. And we still have a team member by the name of James who recognized his talent. Gary became an employee with the trust about 9 years ago, and during a time where he really stood out for his commitment to mission and cause. He also dedicated his professional life to giving back to the community. He became a desk clerk and then became an assistant property manager and actually opened the Star, which was a very kind of high profile architectural property that was about 7, 8, 9 years ago. It was leased up about 5-ish years ago. And again, Gary has been there since the beginning of that particular time frame. We lost Gary about 10 days ago, and it was an enormous and crushing loss for the organization. And we want to honor his memory by experiencing of silence. So if everyone could just make sure they're on mute and in honor of Gary, exercise 1 minute of dedication to him.
Not hearing anything, but hold a second. So join now.
Thank you, everyone, for those that participated in the moment of silence for Gary. We will share that moment with his family. And again, we will share more information as his memorial is shared with us from his family. And thank you for participating in that. Transitioning back into the importance of housing and our panel this evening. One of the things that we're really excited about is some of the activity that has happened in the last 2 to 4 weeks. You'll hear a little bit more about this as Sierra presents some of the progress that's been made at Skid Row Housing Trust, as well as the pipeline that's coming online in the next 30 to 60 to 90 days, and then kind of get into what it takes to really bring that to reality in the Skid Row community, in the LA County, specifically focused around affordable and permanent supportive housing. So some of the key accomplishments and things that we are learning and that we are proud to share with you this week in the last month is we've had more donors come to the table in this kind of increasing moment of pressure as COVID has really kind of hit the Skid Row environment and the surrounding areas. So we're going to be sharing and presenting them in the next couple of weeks. We have engaged in our Instagram live trust talks with a handful of celebrities that have been very committed to this mission and this cause and want to continue to be dedicated to this mission and cause. So we are excited about that. And just a reminder to join, if you guys could make sure that you're on mute would be great. In addition to that, some of the again, not to steal thunder from Sierra and the panel coming up, but we are in late phases of construction. Anyone driving up and down 7th Street can see the progress that's being made. And despite the circumstances that we're in, construction crews and project managers and vendors have really come together to make sure that housing is a priority and that housing continues to be a priority so that we can get our unhoused neighbors in our community kind of off the streets and into their home. With that, wrapping up, one of the things that we want to talk about is just really bringing the awareness to one of our most recent construction projects, again in late phases, is called 649 Lofts and Joshua House. That is a collaboration that we have that's going to provide not only housing, but an on-site clinic for those in the community. So we would really enjoy sharing the information with you after this so that we can really kind of get awareness, fundraising, resources, focus as it relates to that, because it's a very exciting and very much needed property and development that's going to be coming online soon. With that, I think I'm going to transition it over to Sierra Atilano. She holds over 23 years of experience in multiple facets of real estate, including development, portfolio management, property management, finance, and construction. Her track record includes oversight and development of high-level complex real estate portfolios. She's developed a sophisticated acumen related to market rate and affordable housing, including permanent supportive housing, senior housing, farm worker housing, commercial real estate, mixed use, and student housing. She's developed over 2,000 apartment homes in 17 cities across the 3 states. And she's also developed 5 luxury single family estates and 1 million square feet of commercial retail. Over the last 9 years, she has honed her asset management and development expertise, working for one of the nation's top developers, Amcal Residential. And through her passion and commitment to housing, housing policy, development policy, and her sincere and deep drive towards the mission of Skid Row Housing Trust, she is now the Chief Investment and Real Estate Officer of Skid Row Housing Trust. And with that, I'd like to introduce Sierra Atilano.
Thank you for that introduction, Lee. I'm super excited to bring the panelists that we have scheduled for tonight to moderate this panel to discuss ways that we can address housing in California and really how it equates to the housing shortage in both Los Angeles and within the state, and to get really a perspective to the audience of what it takes to for all of the issues that are going on with housing and how they are creating the need to build more housing within our communities, and to get some ideas from our panelists on ways that they feel that we can address some of these issues. So with that, I'm going to introduce our 4 panelists that we have scheduled for tonight. So I'm super excited to start off with my introduction for David Ambroz. He has more than 20 years working in the corporate and nonprofit sector, from Los Angeles City College Foundation to his current role as head of corporate social responsibility for a major media company. David has been active on issues regarding foster care, homelessness, poverty since his own time living in homelessness before entering the foster care system. In his free time, he serves on the Los Angeles City Planning Commission, where he has led efforts to pass groundbreaking policy. David founded Foster More, the largest pro-social effort rebrand foster care using all media platforms. Welcome, David. For our next panelist, I'm introducing Jeffrey Jaeger, who is a co-founder and principal of Standard Companies, a full-service investment asset management firm founded in 2008 and has completed more than $2 billion in transactions through Standard Companies, Standard Capital, Exponent Energy, and Global Guarantee Insurance divisions. Mr. Jaeger has managed all aspects of investment, asset management, construction, financial structuring, corporate strategies, and for Standard Communities. the Affordable Division of Standard Companies. Over the last 20 years, he has played an integral role in acquisition, management, disposition, and financing of real estate and energy transactions with capitalization in excess of $5 billion. Welcome, Jeffrey. Next up is Catherine Kungu, is a program development specialist at California Department of Housing and Community Development. She is responsible for program development, implementation, and provision of technical assistance to local governments for programs addressing homelessness. Currently, she is on the development team for the Governor's Initiative Home Key. The program will provide $600 million for local governments to purchase housing for people experiencing homelessness and are impacted by COVID-19. Ms. Kungu led the design and development for California Emergency Solutions Grant Program and Homeless Technical Assistance Program. She also led the initial coordination of the HCFC and was part of the development team for No Place Like Home program and the Redesign Emergency Solutions Grant Program. Ms. Kungu serves as the California's HCD's policy content expert on all issues affecting and impacting homelessness around the state. And finally, we have Raymond Peters, who may or may not be joining us. We just heard that he may not be able to attend and would be trying to log on. But I still want to mention him as part of the panelists. And he joins us tonight, or will attempt to join us tonight, as lived experience. He's a former trust resident for 9 years, and he recently moved out after advancing his education and currently works in the field of helping others. Please join me in welcoming the panelists tonight. So welcome. All right. So thank you guys again for joining us, and thank you for the audience who's attending as well. We're super excited to work through the questions and bring light to some of the issues that housing that we're facing in housing in California and Los Angeles. So thank you. I think either David or Jeffrey, if you could go on mute. We're hearing a lot of echo back. There we go. Okay, so Catherine, in Los Angeles, it costs an average of $600,000 to build 1 unit of permanent supportive housing, according to the city controller's October 2019 audit. Some of the reasons for this include the cost of land, union level wages for construction workers, expensive material costs, policy decisions, restrictive zoning, and environmental requirements. Can you elaborate on the processes that drive up the cost of building affordable housing?
So I can say what we can do to be able to make sure that projects are penciling out, and some of the policy decisions that we have made to be able to drive the cost of projects. And also one of the things that I can also just be able to elaborate is what we have done here at this, what we have done at this state is to make sure that we are providing more flexibility so we can accelerate the number of affordable housing units. So I'll give you some examples of some things that we have done. With the No Place Like Home program, it's a program where we are administering funding, about $2 billion in funding for folks who are experiencing homelessness, for acquisition, and development of permanent supportive housing for folks who are seriously mentally ill and are also experiencing homelessness. And so for that program, what we did when we designed that program is, instead of the state making the local decisions on who was to receive the funding, we block granted the funding to Los Angeles, and Los Angeles is the one who will be making those local decisions. The other thing that you could see with how we were trying to support the number of programs that were targeted for folks who are experiencing homelessness is providing a capitalized operating subsidy reserve. So some of the things that we have done to think really outside the box to make sure that we can have projects that are deeply targeted. Other things that we have done is making sure that we're collaborating a lot with our other partners. There are 5 different agencies that do provide housing, CalFHA, tax credit, obviously our department. And what we have tried to do is we have tried to have the uniform, the uniform, the UA, the uniform application to make sure that that when folks are submitting an application, that they are aligned with their tax credits. So making sure that we're usually the first lender we're usually first in, and so we usually try to make sure that we're providing an award. We're providing an award or giving confidence to your construction lenders that they will receive state funding, or the project is supported by the county. By the state. I'm sorry. And the other thing also that we try to do is, with tax credits, we try to make sure that when we are releasing our notice for funds of availability, that we're lining it up with a tax credit of when tax credits are going to be released. So again, trying to make your projects more successful, I think is something that we have tried to do. When it comes to development costs and all of those things, I mean, we cannot be able to control the cost of housing, but how can we be able to help increase the number of affordable housing units? And for us, it's really choosing very good policy decisions that can help accelerate that market.
Great, thank you. It sounds like you guys are really working on creating efficiencies for developers and cities alike, so that it streamlines the funding, and then making sure that we can bring housing online a lot faster.
Correct. Yes. Right. I mean, we always believe that the relationship between the state and the county, or the jurisdiction, is a partnership, and that partnership is extended to developers to make sure that that we're providing a lot of flexibility so we can make sure that we can have the most number of units that could be affordable in perpetuity. You'll find us now we've moved away from 30-year covenants. We're now moving to 55-year restrictions, but we're also supporting those projects. We're providing those capitalized operating subsidy reserves that could support deeply targeted projects, making sure that projects are penciling out. So the way that we have underwritten programs has changed. We're obviously very, very, very transparent. When we come up with a new program, it's a program that's usually informed first with stakeholders. Before we design a program, it usually has to go out into public comment. It's a very, very public process, making sure that we're receiving input not only from developers, not only from the local jurisdiction, not only from actual participants who are actually going to be inhabiting the unit. We always try our best to try and make sure that we're designing programs that are well informed and are providing flexibility and are not very onerous. I think one of the things that you will see is that we're trying to be not onerous, trying to make sure that the projects that they can easily braid with other funding sources. So thinking about, if it's not a funding source that is in HCD, what other funding source can the project utilize funds, can leverage funds? Is it your HHH local funds that you have in your community? Is it funds that are provided by another state entity that we're working with? So making sure that there's as little conflicts as possible to make sure that it's a seamless transaction. And that's hard to do in government, but I see us doing a much, much better job just because of the transparency.
We appreciate that. Thank you. So Jeffrey, Standard Companies has completed $1.4 billion in real estate transactions, including the largest conversion of market rate apartments to affordable housing, low income tax credits, and tax-exempt bonds in both California and Illinois' history. Can you highlight some of the challenges and obstacles that you faced and your thinking as to what the needs to change to meet the goal of building 350,000 of units of affordable housing called for in LA County's needs assessment by 2029, or the 509,000 units that are required to meet the current demand according to the California Housing Partnership 2020 report?
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So yeah, so I mean, I think just to give some perspective to the goals that you're talking about with the housing needs assessment, you know, from 2014 to 2019, there was an average of 17,000 units permitted per year. Going forward, to meet those goals, we're going to have to increase the number of units permitted to an average of 56,000 per year. So even with the effects of COVID and everything that's going on in the world, you know, we're going to have to nearly triple, or actually go more than triple the amount of units that we've currently had in production. And so that's going to need a whole host of different elements to meet those goals, being state and local programs to be able to get there. I also think a big part of that is really going to depend on an increased number of partnerships between private developers and investors that have access to those programs and capital that government entities really don't have access to. We've seen a tremendous amount of private capital that's become interested over the last several years in the affordable housing space. I think, you know, there's a lot of people that are starting to realize that you can do good as well as do well, you know, kind of financially in that space as well. And so we've seen a number of different financial institutions and different investors that have socially conscious investment platforms that are starting to come in there, that I think it would be really, in order to get to where we need to be to solve this problem, they've got to bring those dollars in there. I think there are several things that we see that need to be, you know, addressed as well. And, you know, we continue to face NIMBYism, you know, across the state and specifically in California. We bring a perspective. We develop housing from New York all the way back actually to Hawaii. So we see this in a lot of different areas and neighborhoods. I think, you know, in particular, with a lot of the zoning challenges that you see in the city of LA, and in terms of some areas that are, you know, high density multifamily, and then you've got single family areas next door, it can be quite a challenge to figure out how to bring, you know, density to certain projects and get through the development process. One thing that we're seeing that's extremely challenging is the timing differential of what you see on the local level in the city of Los Angeles as compared to what it takes to go through the affordable housing process at the state. You know, a lot of our projects have an average, you know, may take, you know, probably 2 to 3 years to get through the entitlement process in the city of Los Angeles. Whereas in the state of, or on the state level, hold on one sec, my daughter's here. So, sorry about that. The pleasures of working from home.
Yes.
No, so I was just saying that really kind of there's a differential in timing of what we see on the state level getting through the process. We typically, for applications to apply for affordable housing development deals and also acquisition renovations on the state level, it can take us anywhere between 6 to 9 months to get through that process. And so with a 6 to 9 month process on the state level and a 2 to 3 year time frame on entitlements, you have no idea when you're developing product as a developer in Los Angeles what sort of funding environment you're going to end up in at the end of the day. So you're asked to invest, at times, the average project, we probably would have $1 million to $3 million invested in pre-development costs and spec costs to go through the process, in which you're going around with groups trying to get soft funding for deals as you go through the process, only to find out that you go through the state that there's an issue with being able to get, a tax exempt volume cap or, kind of other issues on the state level. And so I think that's something that, the more we can align our local entitlements to be in tandem with what's happening on the state level, I think that's going to be a huge incentive for private developers to bring capital and know that they can invest in these deals, to know that they get them done. Because one of the biggest things we hear is that, they just don't know where they're going to end up, especially with a lot of these programs and with COVID. Things are constantly changing at the state level. For example, there's a terrific program that the state passed with funding, an expansion of the state tax credit program for affordable housing, which has helped a lot of projects get off the ground that were having trouble. They passed that for a 1-year basis with the potential for it to roll into a second year. It's rumored that it's going to come out again this year. There's additional state resources that are not necessarily may not get renewed as well, kind of with that. And so as that program rolls, it's in the governor's budget. Nobody knows whether the state credits are going to come back in this year. That's $400 million worth of subsidy coming into the affordable housing space that local developers, particularly in LA, have no idea whether or not they're going to be able to get their hands on. I think several other things that stand out to me as big things as well. I think there's not enough recognition within the industry and the space between the difference between project-based housing vouchers and also tenant-based vouchers. Tenant-based vouchers are available, and people, developers have access to be able to get tenant-based vouchers for their projects. Project-based vouchers are extremely hard to come by. Project-based contracts, which really ended in 1980, were the last of the large projects that you see on the development side. So if you go back to the last time that we were able to develop projects that were at the scale and the size of what we need to do in order to solve this problem, it was really pre-1980. Sorry about that. It was really pre-1980 was really the last time that you saw those large-scale developments. I mean, if you drive around the city of LA, you see large projects like Park La Brea, and where there are 3,000 units. I mean, a lot of times we're looking at 9% tax credit deals today, or even smaller 4% deals. And the maximum capacity on a 9% deal that you can build is probably 70 units to 100 units, depending on the area that you're in. And that would be a really large 9% tax credit deal. To really be able to develop 56,000 units and be able to put affordable housing, we need to be able to do 500 unit projects, 700 unit projects, which at the moment, the 4% tax credit program is really the only thing that is able to handle that sort of volume. And so I think that continues to present a big challenge, given the changes that they went to a tenant-based system and the rent disparities that you see across the city of LA. There is one for tenant-based vouchers, and on the tenant-based side, it was supposed to provide choice to the tenants, and unfortunately, there's effectively one rent. They're getting a little bit better of dividing it up by some of the micro zip codes, but for the most part, the city of LA has one specific Section 8 rent. The county has another rent for vouchers. As you're developing projects, if you're looking to do high-cost areas and high-cost neighborhoods, like if you're going to develop affordable housing on the outskirts of Beverly Hills or Brentwood or Santa Monica and those areas, and you're using the same rent in the south side of LA, you're going to have a huge funding gap in those areas that's not being recognized in the cost of those projects. The last thing I'll say is the way that the system is set up, you really do have to bring in local and city subsidies in order to apply on the state level to get funding. A lot of that is because they want to see that there's local community support for your projects as you go through the process. But as you go through that, most of those local and city requirements come with a lot of requirements themselves in terms of developing housing. And I think there's a little bit of a PR problem when they talk about the cost of housing being $600,000 a unit. And I mean, you see in the newspaper all the time, I hear in terms of the NIMBYism argument of like, oh my God, it costs $900,000, $1 million a unit to build a project, in Santa Monica. And nobody's talking about the rent disparity in Santa Monica and building a project in Santa Monica where the rents might be, $2,000, $3,000 below market. And the process in order to get the subsidy to build a project like that, because you have to fill the whole, your costs are the same as a market rate development. You have to go every single subsidy source that you go to, which on those projects may have 5 or 6 different subsidy sources, all want to have requirements because they think they're handing out money to build affordable housing, to build housing. So you end up with 6 different sets of requirements, or 5 sets of requirements that you have to do, with 5 different sets of construction requirements in terms of what you have to put in your project, how you have to build it, how you what you do with the residents, et cetera, that it drives up the cost to where the cost has got to be double or triple the cost of projects. And you see that difference if you're not going and developing 9% housing, and you're developing 4% tax credit housing, which is much less subsidized housing, and you don't need as deep a subsidy. The construction requirements are less, and you see the cost of those deals is not nearly what you see on a 9% tax credit deal, which is where all the press is. And also the smaller deals that are getting done as well are the higher cost deals. So.
Thank you. We definitely feel your pain. The trust, obviously as a developer as well. And we have some of the similar issues that you're seeing, specifically with Triple H and the projects that we have kind of waiting in line to receive or to be awarded subsidies that are necessary to even apply for the next rounds of 4% and 9%. There is definitely a shortage of those subsidies, and it's required to get the projects done, especially when you're considering, that it's permanent supportive housing. Those subsidies are a necessity. They're not something that it's not a must have. It's not a like to have on a project. That is a necessity to get the gap to work. So the timing that you talk about between kind of the state and the local level, where traditionally we might have had being held up at the state, we're also getting held up at the local level. So the timeline for building affordable housing went from the 2 to 3 years that you're really looking at to, a 3 to 5 years on some, and expensive extensions if you're purchasing land and the interest that it costs to carry that. I know for our project specifically, we have 2 projects that have been ready to start building for their 2 HHH projects that have been completely ready to apply for tax credits and start construction for more than a year. And the interest that we had to tack onto the land is $1 million between the 2. And those eventually get passed on to taxpayers. So when we look at that $600,000 mark, it's all of these little things that get added on that create a very big thing at the end. And taxpayers see that. And, it's jolting for anyone that's purchasing a home and says, hey, I can purchase a house for this price. How am I moving somebody in off the streets into a building like that? So it does take messaging, and I think for the public to really understand where those costs come from and where they're derived from, and the timing that's around it, right? Because the pressure from politicians to really get a permanent supportive housing out and on the market from those Triple H dollars that everybody voted on many years ago, that messaging really needs to happen to the public, that the timing to get a project from start to finish is a lot longer than I think what people anticipated or what was really messaged to them. So thank you for that. So David, thank you again for joining us. We wanted to ask you that there's $1.5 billion in funding provided by Triple H. Is clearly not nearly enough to support the continuous growing population of people experiencing homelessness, and the program has come under increasing criticism. Only 2 projects have opened, and the LA Times analysis of the data from the Los Angeles Housing and Community Investment Department shows that 57 projects have fallen behind schedule since January. Of those, 21 were pushed back more than 6 months. What do you think the audience should understand about these delays?
Wonderful. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to be part of this conversation. I am not a developer, and I'm always interested in hearing from folks what's going on in the community. This conversation is very personal for me. I think you noted in my intro that I am a formerly homeless person. My family actually spent 10 years homeless before entering foster care, where I emancipated again into homelessness. So this is a very personal and important issue to me, and I made it center to my personal life, but also my professional life. And I want to thank you for hosting this. I would not be here today without the support of organizations and nonprofits. So all of us are part of an ecosystem, and I'm very grateful that my brother, sister, and I are here today to contribute. I want to just take a step back. I think we are really well poised, as always, to watch the car chase on local TV or the fire that just started endlessly. But I think there's a bigger conversation that we should have, which is, what are the costs of not doing this work? We hear and read the statistics as discussed and the obstacles and the need to have a broader conversation because of public scrutiny. But I think what we need to also talk about are, what are the costs of a segregated city, segregated future, where forever your zip code determines your future. I think we need to amplify that message to a broader audience so that articles like the one referenced in the prompt are just part of the story. The other thing I would think that I have found in my long advocacy on behalf of foster youth and homeless youth has been to not cry fire. It is not a productive invitation to dialogue or conversation, and usually it's wrong. Triple H, we're trying something new, and it is beautiful, and it is clumsy, and it is not as fast as I want, or probably we want. And there's no doubt about the urgency of this issue or the urgency of now. But before Triple H and in our own lives, how many of us have been part of a home renovation project that went long, or a work project that fell behind schedule? We hold, and we should hold, government up to scrutiny, but we also sometimes fail to realize that we are the government. We as a people are what make up the commission, citizen appointees. There are a few elected people versus the number of commissioners in the city. And I think that's just one example where we have to remember that the very institutions that we're denigrating or criticizing and or holding accountable is us. We are Soylent Green. I think we should shine a light, but not use that light to incinerate the program or contribute to its denigration. We also need to be sophisticated in our communication. I wonder how much of us, if we pooled our resources and had a more sophisticated marketing conversation, highlighting the positive things that have come from this, the learnings, the people housed, the people soon to be housed, the stories that we could tell to change the public narrative. So when this comes up again for renewal or something like it, that there's not a salted earth where we're trying to plant. I think we're trying to address the systems that are leading to the delays. But the systems that lead to the delays, as I learned when I joined the commission, are decades in the making, and will take really intelligent and determined bureaucrats, and I use that term lovingly, to change. And we're changing those systems. I remember being first invited to join the commission when I learned about the planning code and then the shadow planning code, which some of you may be familiar with. I was floored. We have launched Recode LA. We have launched community plan process that'll hopefully streamline this. We've launched a linkage feed, permanent supportive housing and hotel motel conversion ordinances. Systematically, we are chipping away through volunteers, 9 of them, at the major obstacles that we identify to change things. And I can say I see too few people at these hearings where we're doing this work, and we receive too few support. People come to us when it's their project, but I think we need to have a more ongoing and sophisticated dialogue to address these issues. I also just want to really situate this in the fact that it took us decades to get here with this sticky process of ours. The systems producing the numbers of homeless are many and complicated and human and Lord knows from my own experience, messy. Mental illness, drug abuse, generational poverty, racism, classism. Triple H is at best a down payment, an appetizer. It is not the main course. We have so much more work to do. It's interesting. My colleague on the panel mentioned Park La Brea. I was thinking the other day when I went there pre-COVID, I looked around and I looked into the history of that facility and how it was built and the different companies involved. And I think that's something we have forgotten as a people, even in Los Angeles, this the city of dreams, which is we can do big things. We forget that, and we micro cut everything we try and do to the point where it looks like we shouldn't do anything together. And then we kind of play around the edges. That's a problem. because we need to address the systems that are leading to the homeless. And Triple H is going to be part of that conversation and part of the solution. We should learn from it. We should learn from the processes that are holding these up, and we should change those processes. And I think we're doing those things. But the other part of Triple H that I just am mindful of is we've got to be bold. Triple H is incredible, but let's pass mandatory inclusive affordable housing. Let's do it. There are many examples of ways that we can begin to address this. It is a decision by a people to or not to. I think AAA was a bold experiment, a down payment, and a vote of confidence by the citizens of Los Angeles. And we need to build off of that, not tear it down. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely agree with you. Thank you for that. And thank you for, messaging that to the audience, and so that they understand that this is a long process. You mentioned in your answer about, a housing project, if anybody's done a renovation, and all the side ways that could go sideways, and the length of time that it takes. And that's, living in a house and something that's very personal to you at the time that you do those renovations. And very similar with, this process of Triple H. These are people waiting to be housed, and they were waiting to be housed prior to Triple H, and they're still waiting to be housed now. And I think that, Triple H did bring light to everyone, and it showed that everyone cared about this. It passed with great numbers, I think even more than what everybody anticipated. But what it did show is that people did care about the issue, and it did open up those conversations to be had, to say, all right, homelessness is an issue that we do want to address as a people. I think that there was a lot of messaging that still needs to happen, and you highlighted a lot of those in your answer, and I appreciate that, because it's just the start. It really is the start of, and a down payment is a really good way to look at it, that this is something that is going to be ongoing, but this is the start of that conversation, and it's a drop in the bucket of really what needs to be done. And taxpayers and voters really need to understand that this is going to be a long haul, because it took us a long time to get into this position, and it's going to take us a long time to get out, and it's going to take everybody's help to really do that. So thank you. So Catherine, most of the large states have only one department that allocates affordable housing funding. California has 5, which I think you mentioned that earlier. And of those departments that report to different elected officials, developers have to file a series of applications to assess and to access a dozen different funding programs that each have their own regulations. What steps is the state taking to build some sort of capacity that will be required to address the affordable housing crisis?
So as I mentioned earlier, one of the things that we have tried, I'm really grateful to hear everybody's perspective, especially the perspective of a developer, the perspective of David, and sitting at the commission, making those decisions and needing support for projects. I think that's very, very interesting to me. Some of the things that we have done, and I think I mentioned a little bit earlier, is making sure that our department is partnering with the other 5 agencies as they're reviewing their regulations. We're making sure that we're at the table. I know that our department sits at the board of CalFHA, sits at the works hand in hand with TCAC. In addition, there is one of the things that we're trying to do, especially in the realm of homelessness, is making sure that we're coordinating with all the, I think, of over 17 different state housing agencies that provide housing programs, trying to make sure that we're providing a more coordinated effort. Right now, what the department is, what the state is working on is trying to put together a strategic plan that where we can think about things like, can we have a universal application amongst all of the agencies? Can we streamline all of our regulations or all of our requirements so that you have one agency, you have one an applicant has one agency where they can be able to submit an application. A simple thing is also, do we have a brochure so that you can know how to grade your funding sources and knowing when, and knowing what application requirements fit into the project. And so I think that we're trying a more concerted effort to be able to do that. I still will say that we still have many, we still have the 5 different agencies serving different functions. However, with us in other departments on community development and working on affordable housing, I think the way that we have divided ourselves is we've divided ourselves into 3 distinct buckets. One of them is access to opportunity, making sure that the projects that are coming into the department are taking advantage of the opportunities that are there. Thinking about climate change, making sure that the programs that we're investing are also thinking about how to reduce VMTs, how to make sure that that reduce commute times for just hardworking folks. The third thing is also thinking about homelessness, vulnerable communities. So those are some of the things that we're working on in our department. Another thing also is just also trying to think about making sure that we have a notice of funding of availability, a calendar that is available to everybody for all of the funding sources that are available. At HCD, we have 25 different affordable housing programs, and we really try to make sure that they're aligned, that by the time you come in for funding to the department, that is aligned with tax credit, or folks are aware when those deadlines are.
I think that extremely helpful. And you mentioned, education about the programs there, which I think is really important. As Jeffrey mentioned, there's a lot of new private capital that will be coming into affordable housing. And I think understanding those programs that the state has available will be really important for some of those developers.
Right. I mean, one of the things that I hope that we could be able to, that I do hear, is that most of our programs do not pay for pre-development costs. And I think only one of the programs, the program that I'm actually currently working on, which is Project Home Key, which is the governor's initiative to help communities acquire properties as quickly as possible. This program is very, very flexible. It pays for acquisition. You don't have to you don't have to have evidence of site control as our traditional programs. You just have to be able to show when you can be able to get site control, a plan and a timeline. But again, it does have very tight expenditure deadlines, and we are providing technical assistance. We are partnering with Department of Real Estate, with Department of General Services, to support communities if they need appraisal, if they need environmentals, if they need just even site identification, so they can be able to bring on projects as quickly as possible, especially just for this particular program. So as you can see, the types of programs that we're bringing on to market are different, flexible, they're well thought out. When you're sitting at the state and you're looking at designing a program, you're thinking about not only your rural community that also has folks experiencing homelessness or has affordable housing issues, but also thinking about your community too. I mean, LA has a third of the country's a third of the state's homelessness just in Los Angeles County. And when you look at the city, it's 37% of the total homeless population. So those are the things that we're thinking about, but also trying to think about equity, thinking about who has local resources to bring into deals. Some communities are well resourced and some communities aren't, and what supports can we be able to provide those deals?
Thank you. David, the City of Los Angeles has notoriously complex approval process that limits participation and extends development timelines while increasing costs. What can be changed to increase affordability and embrace inclusionary housing in Los Angeles? As someone who's experienced homelessness, how has that influenced your decisions as a member of Los Angeles City Planning Commission? I think you're on mute.
How about now?
Now we can hear you.
Wonderful. You have a second career in news. I remember when the mayor asked me to serve on the City Planning Commission, and I shortly thereafter became the president. I remember because I realized what a profound position the City Planning Commission, what a role it plays in our modern life, and how when I was young and living underground in subway tunnels or in bus stations or in parks or in wherever, how it all felt so far away that my family was at best an afterthought. I remember when the mayor asked me to serve, I had gotten to know him while I was a foundation director at Los Angeles City College, which is still probably my favorite job. And I asked very candidly, are you sure? And I reminded him that I am a formerly homeless alumnus of foster care with a rather radical agenda, including my belief that housing is a fundamental right. And here I sit. So he appointed me. And if we think back to those times, the mayor ran on this idea of back to basics. And when I took over the CPC as president, I remember thinking very clearly as I approach in my current job, what are basics? What do we mean by that? What are the processes? What are the processes to diversify our staff? How are we budgeted? What is our technological capability? What is our relationship with sister departments? And a lot of that was problematic, to say the least. The City Planning Commission is the second body in our charter that is able to initiate anything related to land use law, essentially, or that's broadly speaking. And yet, for too long, it had acted at best as a rubber stamp. Now, I think you referred to the Los Angeles processes as notorious, and I would challenge that description. Our notorious process is a result of democratic urges and initiatives, a desire for transparency, for fighting corruption, and a rather predictable hesitation on the larger public to resist change. Those urges are then manifest in our elected leaders, and those folks have conflicting demands. They are at the same time solving problems, and these are rather savvy individuals, and at the same time meet the desire of those who elected them. We all know the percentage of people that vote in Los Angeles. We need in this community fundamental ideas and a sophisticated communication strategy and a mobilization far beyond conversation today. For example, charter reform is coming up. I think we could take advantage of that moment. Just a few brief thoughts to your question as it relates to the City Planning Commission. The delays. Okay. We have politicized development in this city to the point of absurdity, and aren't we all reading about it in the LA Times? Project after project that I have helped put affordable housing into was then removed at Plum. I did not hear an outcry. We need to depoliticize planning and land use, and that is going to be a very ugly fight. Other things I've come to learn is neighborhood character is a modern way of segregating neighborhoods. When we talk about protecting single-family neighborhoods, what does that mean, and for whom? In my years in the City Planning Commission, I have, excuse me one second. Hey guys. You have a daughter, I have two children. We have to think bigly and boldly. In my years in the City Planning Commission, I have never, ever seen CEQA used to protect the environment. Not once. It's used as a cottage industry by all parties to extract concessions and, in my mind, legalize bribery. It invites the very crisis we're living through and that you all are working towards. Finally, I think I go back to this idea of the larger public conversation that I have come to understand in the CPC. We are not doing enough to engage the public, and I don't mean a brochure. We need a sustained campaign, much like we're seeing in response to the murder of George Floyd, that brings the plight of a vast number of people, majority, minority, that are suffering to the fore. This has gone on too long. I am too old. And we have to challenge this language of otherness, of cleaning up. When I sit on the CPC, I have folks come out, probably for some of your projects, and they talk about the danger of your tenants.
Mm-hmm.
And it infuriates me. And you may have seen me get furious. They talk about building walls.
Yep.
There was a project in Van Nuys where they talked about building, I think they asked for 24-foot walls, just taller than prison.
That was our project, actually.
Well, I remember that. We need to talk about the balance between neighborhoods and the city. And what I often find myself challenged by is a very small focus on a specific geography as opposed to a citywide crisis. So I want to just kind of conclude my rather long diatribe that we need to get engaged. We need to not talk to each other. We need to be bold. We need to work together and really change the systems that are leading to all of the obstacles. I can't tell you how many times I've stumbled across a policy where I'm like, why does this exist? And then work with staff to try and do some cleanup. So for instance, Recode, the community plan process, where we're trying to clean up things and make it more transparent. And I'm glad to talk about any of those. But I will tell you, as a citizen appointee, I spend between 20 and when I was president, 40 hours a week on a commission. We need to know all of the commissioners. We need to support them. We need to get ideas in front of them. We need to engage our educational institutions to come up with white papers that are passable. And we need to support big, bold plans because this issue is not going to be solved by Triple H or the CPC. So thank you. And I hope that answered your question.
No, thank you very much. And I definitely agree with the need for further conversation around everything that you mentioned. Having been in affordable housing, having actually grown up in affordable housing, let me start with that, through my younger years, and seeing the systematic issues that we're all talking about now, and you see on the TV and the news, having grown up in that environment, having realized that this was the passion that I really wanted to bring to my life. Never did I think that I would be a developer in affordable housing. I started off in market rate doing luxury builds, thinking that's where I wanted to focus. And later on realized that I really wanted to turn my talents to bettering communities in a larger sense, and really pushing nonprofits and being able to support affordable housing where I came from, and really creating an experience for residents that was unlike had ever been seen before in affordable housing. You know, the projects that you mentioned, like for Park La Brea, and seeing those larger builds that were done back in the days were projects, and they're all getting rehab now and redesigned and rebuilt. And like I said, having grown up in one of those, I can tell you that, you know, the experience that should be had in a housing community like that is not what it was in the past, and really needs to change for the future. Inclusionary housing is something that I feel very passionate about. And I think it is a right to be housed. And I think that's the only way you get around having people live in every community with that affordable rent burden, rather than just in selected areas where it's the cheapest to build for a developer. I've seen this come full circle, like I said, from being a resident in a community like that to developing on the market rate side and student housing, and then now in affordable housing and permanent supportive housing. It's really a full circle. It's kind of a rainbow or a spectrum of affordable housing that really needs to be addressed at a much larger conversation, because it's all those root causes that you were talking about that have created the system that we're trying to fix little pieces of, and really it has to start with a much larger conversation. So I appreciate all the work that you're doing on the Planning Commission, and support your big, bold ideas, because it's definitely something that's needed. All right, Jeffrey, Standard Companies identifies enduring competitive advantages by challenging conventional thinking. What do you need to change about the conventional thinking related to affordable housing to address the crisis?
Sorry, I was on mute there. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that really in terms of, there's a few things that I think we need to really kind of focus on as far as kind of changing conventional thinking. I think, and I've hit them already. I think that, or some of them already. I think that specifically this idea of, that affordable housing costs this tremendous amount of money, and that, that's what all affordable housing projects cost, I think needs to, kind of be examined. And I think, as David said, I think he's right on. I mean, there needs to be really kind of a groundswell movement and PR around, kind of what's needed and the housing that's there. I think the other thing that needs to be changed a little bit on conventional thinking is how much impact local and state municipalities really have on the affordable housing crisis. I think that most of the, kind of anger and kind of need for change and call for change comes at the city level with your city officials and your planning department and then your state department. If you look at, across the affordable housing deals and our capital stack and your capital stack, I'm sure it's Skid Row Housing Trust. I think what you'd find is, on some deals, the federal government's providing 100% of the funds, to, at the very minimum, the federal government's probably providing 60 to 70% of the funds. So in most cases, and then if you start to peel back how much of that is coming from state resources versus local city resources, I think you'd find that your local city resources that are coming in the city of LA are, a very, very small percentage of the overall project that it takes, to get these projects done. The big vast majority is the federal level. So I think that, I think people need to be looking for change on the federal side, and there needs to be real federal intervention in order to, effectuate real change. And I think that, kind of we need to address that in terms of people's understanding and unification across the country. That this is not just an LA issue. This is an issue that, all, kind of cities are seeing across the board, and even rural areas are starting to see increases in homelessness, and other things that some of the cities are seeing. And especially during COVID, we're seeing people moving out to suburban areas, from urban areas, and I think they're going to start to see a lot of the same issues that some of these urban areas are seeing as well.
Well, thank you. So I see Raymond has joined us. Raymond, thank you.
I just got home from work. It was a rough day. We were delivering food to clients.
Well, thank you for that.
LA, downtown, South Central, everywhere. So it went longer than expected, but I was able to make it.
Well, thank you. So you've experienced homelessness, and you participated in a long-term recovery program at the Union Rescue Mission, and then you were a trust resident for 9 years, and you advanced your education, you found employment helping others, and just recently you moved out of our community and into a new apartment. You're a prime example of how important housing is to an individual's growth and wellness. Can you share your journey and how the ability to be housed has supported you in your goals?
Yeah, well, I became homeless in 2008. I was working for DeVry University, and they had a downturn in students, and as a result, they laid off a lot of financial aid advisors. So I lost my apartment. I stayed with a good friend of mine for a while, but that didn't work out. So I found myself homeless in, I think it was November 2008. And then from there, I went to the Union Rescue Mission, and I took part in the discipleship program there for a year. And then I was an apprentice for a year working in the clothing room. And then in 2011, I moved to the Rushmore Hotel. So when I moved to the Rushmore Hotel, I was happy to be housed, but I kind of felt that this wasn't my end, but I wasn't so sure how to not make that my end. So I really got involved with the case managers, and we really came up with a plan. We came up with a plan for me to go to LACC, study human services, get a certificate, get an AA. And I was able to do that. So I got my AA in 2017. And then from there, I transferred to Cal State LA. And I went there. When you're with the trust, you can't be full-time. You can only be like part-time or quarter-time because of funding. So it took a while. So I transferred to Cal State LA, and I'm in my last semester now, which is great. So I'll have my my BA in rehabilitation services, and what I would like to do is get my master's in social work. I would like to become a licensed clinical social worker. Being housed is definitely crucial, because being in Skid Row is so chaotic. It's so chaotic, and there's so many negative forces. And if you don't have a room or somewhere to live in Skid Row, then you're a victim. You can be a part of those forces that take you down. So being in Skid Row Housing Trust, the Rushmore Hotel, in that room, I was able to come up with a plan and goals. Like I started with smaller goals, and then I came up with larger ones. And I think that helped me keep my focus, because I do have a background of drug addiction, methamphetamine and alcohol. The meth was a one-time experience, but the alcohol was many years, So being down there, I had to have a plan, because the opportunity to use or to relapse was there every day, all day. So being able to have a room that I can go into, put the key in the door, close the door, create my own little world, really helped me reach my goals. But definitely working with the caseworkers. I think the caseworkers' role in the trust, especially in the hotels, I think is crucial. It's crucial, because a lot of us at that time, we're so scatterbrained. There's so much going on, and the caseworker kind of helps you pull yourself together, pull your thoughts together. If you need like mental health or anything like that, they can help you with that also. Whatever you need, they're there to help you. So housing is crucial, and I was able to work towards my goal, and it's been really, really amazing, because I pictured myself moving out. And I never thought that I would end up living where I'm living. I'm looking in Koreatown, and I'm looking in South Central. I'm looking in Los Angeles. I put an application in Woodland Hills. I don't know, anything about Woodland Hills, right? Where is that? So I put that in, right? You know what I mean? What is Woodland Hills? So Lord and behold, they called me. And then they showed me this apartment. This is just part of it right here. That's part of it. That's a living room. They have a balcony, washing dryer in the unit. It's amazing. So it goes to show that even if you're housed in downtown Skid Row in an SRO, just putting in the work and being willing to put in the work, and humble yourself and realize you don't know everything, eventually it's gonna work out for you. But it'll be far and beyond what you could have ever thought or imagined. Whatever ever thought or imagined. My job right now, I work with the homeless population, and I do house clients. So I have a caseload. And one of my biggest concerns, and I just have to say this, is that we have a lot of clients that's, let's say, on GR, right?
Mhm.
And we have clients, let's say, that have a voucher to move from the city. And let's say they are housed in an SRO or Skid Row housing. The biggest problem is coming up with $1,668 of a deposit and the first month's rent on 221 income. That's the barrier.
Mhm.
That's the barrier. So somehow there has to be some, I don't know, there has to be some kind of way where some of the residents can be assisted, because I know of some that are stuck. I know some that are stuck because they don't have that. Lucky for me, I came across this job, so I was able to do that. But that seems to be a huge problem, a huge problem. So maybe in the future, I'll be able to help with that, But going from homelessness to being a normal person and back into the mainstream of society, it really helped my self-esteem. My self-esteem is really great now, thank God. I can sleep at night. I can go to sleep. And I'm going to tell you a personal experience I had. And this is when I first moved in. And I took a bath. And then I realized when I was sitting in the bathtub, I haven't sat in the bathtub in 12 years. It really did something to me. And then when I got the kitchen, and then I was cooking. I had 4 burners, and I noticed myself using one burner, right? Cooking a full meal, but one burner. And then it dawned on me, Raymond, you got 4 burners. You don't have to use that one burner. So it's those little things, those little simple things that you kind of that we kind of forget and take for granted, But then when you realize that all that's there for you, it's a amazing humbling experience. And every single day, I tell you something. Every single day when I go to work, and I have to catch the bus at Universal Station. I have to get out, catch the bus. For me not to have to go back is just incredible, man. It's incredible. And it really started at I want to say my journey started at the Union Mission, but it actually started at the Rushmore Hotel. It actually started there, because that's when I was able to set goals. Do my caseworker had me do vision boards. I did vision boards on my wall, all that before I got the certificate and the degree and everything, all that on the vision board. And before I know it, everything came to pass. Everything. So I'm doing more vision boards for the future. So the Be Housed is the kind of work that we do is how can I say? I want to say it's noble. It's noble, and many people appreciate us and you guys more than you can imagine. The fact that we're even discussed is such a blessing for us. Yeah. So
I just want to congratulate you on your new place. I'm so excited.
Yeah. It's been, I'm very happy. Yeah, I am. So, it's cool.
Very glad that you were able to join us today, and we appreciate hearing your story and all your success, and we wish you more in the future, and I hope to see more vision boards from you.
Oh, for sure. I'm working on them. I'm literally working on them for the next 5 years. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Oh, David. I don't know him, but hey, David. So, okay. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you
All right.
guys for hanging in there. I know that it's we've went a little bit over on time, and I know, David, you have a hard stop. Do we have any questions from the audience that we want to address, Jet?
We do. Good evening, everybody. Hi, sorry about that. This is Jet Doy, and I am the Vice President of Development and Advancement at Skid Row Housing Trust. I want to thank everybody. That was such a fascinating conversation, and I appreciate everybody staying and listening to what our guests had to say. The first question comes, actually, there's a comment for David. I know that you have a hard stop at 8, and so I thought you should know that you have a fan on the line. Laulette Jones Boyce wants you to know that she has spent many hours volunteering in the community and with the trust, and she appreciates this moment and everything you're saying. And we need to do this together and be bold to see results. So that is David's fan comment. And with that, we have a question that I think is best addressed to Jeff and Sierra. Lily Sofiani, who is the district representative for California State Senator Holly Mitchell, would like to understand more, Jeff, about what you were saying changed with project-based vouchers in the 80s.
Sure. So it really is a change between project-based contract Section 8 and project-based vouchers, or went to tenant-based vouchers. That was really, I believe it was first changed with HUD's revision to Section 8 in 1974. That was kind of the first time they switched from the 236 program that was incredibly successful at producing units. I think in a matter of 10 years through the kind of late 60s into mid 70s, it produced somewhere between 350 to 400,000 units, which large scale projects, a lot of what you see in New York and Chicago, LA, major cities. And then they switched. There were some issues, I believe, at the time with funding and some of the corruption issues and discussions with kind of budget sizes and things of that sort. And so they switched to a tenant-based program in which it really wasn't funding developers to incentivize developers to build housing. It was more providing freedom for people to have vouchers, and the idea was they could go wherever they wanted with their vouchers versus having to stay at these projects that had the federal subsidy. When they did that and they allowed the residents to be able to move, it was really Reagan who did a massive expansion of that in the early 80s. I believe it was around 82, 83. In which he effectively stopped the federal project-based program and switched only to vouchers that were administered by the local housing departments. And when they did that, effectively, the tenants had the freedom to move, and since they can move, there was really no added subsidy value associated with those vouchers because it was the same as someone was paying rent and someone was a tenant-based voucher and they were to move out, you lost that subsidy. And so no lenders would underwrite, the tenant-based voucher program, and it lost subsidy. And that was in the early 80s. In 1986, they passed the tax credit law. So with that huge reform, kind of tax credits, as we've been talking about them on the federal level, were really a response to those changes and came about. And they've done a wonderful job in producing housing, but not on the same scale and level that they saw with federal programs that were, kind of there before. I don't know if that helps answer.
Thank you
what I know.
That was incredible. That was incredibly thoughtful and well presented answers. Sierra, do you have anything that you want to add to that, or do you think Jeff covered?
No, Jeff covered it. Thank you.
Okay. And then I know it's been a long panel, so the last question is from Al Cohen, who is interested in knowing more about why project-based vouchers are no longer available, which isn't exactly the case. And I think that Jeff probably addressed that, unless someone would like to add to it.
I would just add that they are still available, but they are slim to none. They're very competitive for developers to receive, and you're not able to garner the same amount that is needed for a large scale property. You normally have to kind of we call it cobbling together vouchers with non-voucher units in order to get projects to work.
And I have a little bit to add. I mean, because we understand the problem. For us, what we have tried to do is we've tried to introduce programs. We've had rapid rehousing, rental housing voucher, rental housing assistance programs. And we've tried to be very, very flexible because different I mean, there are different FMRs, and we know that the FMRs, especially for California, they just do not meet what market, I mean, do not meet the rates or don't meet the rent. And so what we have tried to do, and we've tried to push up our local programs, is to think about maybe paying allowing programs to pay for 2 times FMR, so those programs are supported. One of the things that we do find is the challenge that we do find is that we have this expenditure period, which means that they cannot be able to support projects long term, and so this is the reason why, again, it's the onus goes back to the developer, goes back to the county to figure out what other sources could they be able to cobble up. The other thing also that we've also tried to do to be able to support programs is, again, trying to have the capitalized operating subsidy reserves in our projects, so making sure that the projects are paying for the operating deficits, and not so much rent, but also thinking about other development costs for those units. For the units that are going to house our target population. So it's been also a little bit more generous and trying to think about how we can continue to do that. I do agree we do not have a lot of homelessness prevention dollars. We do have the issue of this funding is provided by different state agencies. But again, we're really, really trying our best to make sure that they're aligned and that we're using the same requirements.
Thank you so much for that. And well, with that, I really want to thank Kathy, Jeff, David, and Raymond. This was a fascinating panel, and I'd like to thank Lily and Al and Lalette for their comments, and just let you know how much we appreciate your supporting this conversation and helping our audience to understand more about these issues. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we hope that everybody on the line will be able to join us for our next virtual community meeting, which is associated with the challenges related to becoming housed and exiting homelessness. It is on Thursday, August 27th at 6:30 p.m. In the meantime, I hope you have a wonderful month, and we appreciate your support.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks for having us.